As you're going to see today, storytelling means something maybe a little bit different than what you think it is. And one of my goals here today is not just to give you ideas, but to really try to enact some kind of mindset change. And so what I want to do and ask, and only if you feel comfortable, close your computers. And if you need to stay it open for whatever reason, fine. But anything I say today, first of all, you'll be able to get all the slides, so you can refer to it later. And secondly, I think the more here you're going to be, the more you're going to get out of that. If you need to have the computer open, feel free. Does that sound good? Cool. Great. So let's start with a bit of an icebreaker. So what I want everybody to do is stand up and give yourself a little bit of room to move. So don't trip over the chair. Don't sue me if you trip over the chair. Okay, what I want you to do is turn to somebody beside you right now, preferably someone you don't know, and decide between the two of you who is A and who is B. Okay, so follow my lead here. Follow my lead. Well, I could just let you talk all day. Follow my lead, please. A is going to start by, it's a mirroring exercise. So A is going to start with some kind of movement, and B, your job is to mirror that movement. Go. Okay, now B is the leader. So B is going to make a movement and A is going to follow. B move, A follow. Okay, listen carefully. Listen carefully. A and B, you're going to move together, but no one is the leader and no one is the follower. Go. Okay, great. Next instruction. Turn around and find a new partner, someone you don't know, and decide between the two of you who's A, who's B. Should I duck face? Okay, let's do this again. So let's do this again. A is going to lead, B is going to follow. A's the leader, B's the follower. Okay, B's the leader. B, you're the leader now. Okay, one more instruction. So look at me for a second. A, start with making just one movement. Any kind of movement. Just one movement to your partner. B, your job is to take the same movement and exaggerate it in some way. So make it bigger. Now A, make it even bigger. Now B, make it even bigger. Now bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Now give yourself a big round of applause. You can all sit down now. And I want to ask you one last thing as an icebreaker. Take about 60 seconds to turn to the person beside you and say what you noticed in that exercise. What was different from one person to the next is one question you could talk about. Another one is, how did you navigate that time when you had to move together? I'll give you about 60 seconds to chat, and then we'll debrief and bring it all together. So go. The clock's not going. Okay. So really quickly, and we don't have mics around here, so if you're going to say something, make sure you say it loud so everybody can hear it. I hate being on stage because of the lights, because I'd rather see you, so I'll probably be down here. Is that cool with everybody? So what were some things that you noticed about that exercise? Yes, please. Please shout loud. Yeah, you, in the gray. Yeah.
Connection, making sure you're having engaging eye contact with your partners because it's easier to move in sync.
Yeah, so connection is the key. How did connection change from one partner to the next? That's a question. Yes, please.
You can tell that a lot of people felt uncomfortable and it really took them outside of their comfort zone.
So what did you do to reply to someone who is outside of their comfort zone? How did you make it more comfortable for them? Smile. Great. Any other things that you realized in that brief exercise? Yes, please. Different people need to be connected to differently. This is my underlining, okay? Maybe one or two more observations? You too. So start with you. Lovely. She said different speeds and tempos. What great language as we get into storytelling. Yeah, another great observation. Doing something familiar like the Macarena made it easier. You're the last one.
When nobody was the leader, we essentially ended up just taking turns, like initiating something to make it work.
Yeah, great. So when nobody's the leader, we took turns to initiate. So great observations, simple exercise, lots of depth. I'm hearing myself echo in my ear, which is weird. So I have a client who's an interior designer, and he tells me that when we're evaluating design, do people like architecture and design? Especially here in the architectural capital of the world, or one of them. What's interesting about design is it's not about how it looks. He said to me, it's about the biofeedback it creates. The goal of design is to create biofeedback inside of us. And biofeedback is a fancy word for this word called emotion. And storytelling is exactly the same way. It's not about what we say, write, create. It's not what we put in the video. It's all of what we're optimizing for is the experience somebody else has. And the challenge with that is there's what, like 200 people in this room? That means we're having 200 slightly different experiences, although everybody's probably cold because it's so cold in here. Right? So part of the thing that we need to think about as storytellers, and guess what, we all are storytellers, is how do we find a way to optimize for their experience, and specifically their emotional experience. So that's something I really want to talk about today. So my name's Jordan Bauer. I run a consultancy based in Vancouver called Transformational Storytelling. I work with clients across the spectrum, going from big tech companies in Silicon Valley. I work with banks. I work with a big Canadian retailer. Who else have I worked with? Mozilla, Criteo, CIBC, FedEx, and then small businesses as well, towns, all kinds of different people. What I love about my work is, number one, I'm not niched, but secondly, that there's such a diversity of what storytelling can mean. And like I said today, every one of you is a storyteller. The one thing I won't do today is tell you the right way to tell a story, because that's totally inappropriate. What I want to do instead is talk through the process. I'm Canadian, so I'm always watching myself when I say process. You can count the sorries. But I want to teach you a process. And the process is going to be a bit of a mind bender, especially if you're someone who's here looking for tactics. We're going to get to tactics, but especially at the beginning of the presentation, really let yourself sit with the process, because I think it's so essential to think about what's happening in these times. Does that sound good? I love those TED Talk nods, so just keep them coming. So I want to tell you a quick story about where I come from to give you a sense for what I bring to this work. And it's a story about the worst breakup I've ever had in my life. Sound interesting? So about 10 years ago, I was living in Vancouver, and I came home and found a note waiting for me on my kitchen table. And I went into the bedroom that I shared with my girlfriend, and I opened up the closet, and all of the clothes were gone. And I went back out to the kitchen table, and I picked up the note, and it said, "I'm in love with another man." Right? And I felt like somebody had taken one of those big samurai swords, like in Kill Bill, and just chopped me off right at the chest. And because I was 29 going on 17, which meant that I was a child of the 80s and had been raised on hundreds of romantic comedies, I thought, what do you do when your partner leaves you? You do one huge romantic gesture to try to get her back. Has anyone else here been stupid enough to do something like that? Somebody bail me out. Yes, there, I saw a couple guys over there who did that. And so the idea that I came up with was to put a video up on this brand new website that was called Kickstarter. You know Kickstarter, the crowdfunding website? Back in 2010, nobody knew about it. And I put up this video telling my friends, family, and the whole world that I wanted to walk from Canada to Mexico. Now, why the fuck would anybody want to walk from Canada to Mexico? It had been my girlfriend's idea. And all winter long, we've been having this conversation around, like, should we do it? Should we not do it? What shoes should we wear? What route should we take? And so on. And so when she left, I desperately thought that if I committed to this idea, I would prove my love to her and she would come back. Like I said, I was 29 going on 17. So I put up this video, I posted it on Facebook, I sent it out to the world, and I honestly thought that nobody was going to care about this thing. It was just going to be that thing that gets ignored by social media. Within seconds, I started to get emails, $20 from a friend, $30 from a coworker, $50 from a cousin, $100, and so on. On day 4, I was Kickstarter's project of the day, which meant that I was front and center on the Kickstarter homepage, and on day 9, I reached my $5,000 goal. That was exactly how I felt at the time. And that day when I reached the goal, I met my now ex-girlfriend for sushi in Vancouver, and I said, I've got the money to do the thing that you've been talking about doing, because I never wanted to do this thing in the first place. And what she literally said to me was, I'll think about it. And I spent the rest of the summer hanging on this huge choice. Do I send an email to the now 138 people who gave me $8,061 and tell them that I had no desire to walk across America and that Mexico is actually really, really, really far away? Or do I walk into REI and walk out with a new tent, new sleeping bag, new cook stove, new foam mattress, new shoes, new harmonica, new frisbee, what I call the hobo starter package, and start walking across America? So on September 1st of 2010, I left Vancouver. I went to a place called Port Angeles, Washington in the Olympic Peninsula near Seattle. I walked across Washington State, over the Columbia River, all the way down the coast of Oregon, into the Redwoods and through the Redwoods, and down over the Golden Gate Bridge into San Francisco, the whole length of Big Sur, Los Angeles, San Diego, to get to the border between Tijuana and San Diego. It took me 316 days, and by the way, 3 pairs of shoes. And so what I did, do people know Cheryl Strayed, who did that movie Wild? So there's this big walking trail on the West Coast. It's called the Pacific Crest Trail. And she walked that, which was up in the mountains, isolated, wild. I walked the coastline, which meant I was in beaches and trails, but I was also in towns and cities along the way. And so my story was much more about people that I met than it was about the isolation of being alone. And what was literally happening to me is I was carrying my story with me. And, so I grew this big beard and I had these sad, heartbroken eyes. And I would be walking into the coffee shop and, there I am having a coffee and there you are. And, it's Oregon, so everyone's so friendly. And you would say maybe like, where are you going? And I would say, I'm walking to Mexico. And you would say, oh, my girlfriend left me, blah, 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 blah. And I would give my whole life story to you. And if you were compassionate and had time, and again, you're in Oregon, so maybe you had time, at the end of it, I would then say to you, have you ever been through something like this? And then you might tell me a story, and then you would cry, and I would cry, we would hug each other, and we'd be like, I'll never forget you. And then I would leave, and I would walk, and there you were in your garden 100 yards down. So I ended up meeting something like 5,000 strangers along the way. And the strangers took me in, and they gave me all of these different things that one would need when you would walk across the country. So the reason I'm telling you this is because I learned 3 big lessons from this trip. The first lesson is that everybody has a story. And not only do every single one of us have a story, but every single one of us are living in a story. Stories aren't just history, they're 3-dimensional. And what I started to notice is that I was a character in other people's stories. The biggest challenge I had wasn't somebody robbing me or pulling a gun on me. The biggest challenge I had was trying to figure out, who do I trust, who don't I trust? And the reason that was an even more profound challenge was because in 2010 and 2011, if you can remember, we were going through massive financial crisis. And what I learned was that every single person I met, their stories were changing. And we can say it even more clearly, what was literally changing was their identities. And I want to talk about that word for 1 second because it's really relevant to where we're going, identity. What does an identity mean? An identity, the way we use it, tends to mean 2 different things. The first way we use identity is we tend to use it to describe some fundamental aspect of ourselves. So I am fundamentally a white man. I'm fundamentally Canadian. And those are things that I fundamentally cannot change. But on the other hand, there is this other way that I refer to identity. I am Jordan Bauer. I am on this journey to find myself. I'm doing my Eat, Pray, Love stuff. And my identity is something that is changing and growing as I move through my life. And when you think about identity in that way, you see that those two things are actually in lockstep to each other. I can't separate who I am from where I've come from, but where I've come from changes as I change who I am. Does that make sense? And what I started to learn is that identity all over the world, and especially in this country, is changing. I want to give you some examples of identities that are changing. One identity is an identity called employee. Who here identifies as an employee? So 10 years ago, employees would go to their office, they would use a computer that somebody else gave for them, you would work from 9 to 5, you would go home and your work was done. And that was what you would do. And you were part of a team where there was a senior person and things worked in a very predictable fashion. Suddenly, today, employees can work from anywhere, they can work at any time, for better or for worse. We work in cross-functional teams, we're much more dynamic and networked than ever before. Does that sound right? So we're seeing this huge shift in what it means to be employee. Another identity that's changing is an identity called leader. In the old days, a leader was a guy who was taller than me and had more hair, and he would get up on stage and tell you the way that things were and then send you out to go do them. Today, we're seeing, and I think this is for the better, that identity of the leader is changing, and the responsibilities that a leader is being tasked with are changing too. Give me a nod if you think that's right. Other identities that are changing, there used to be this identity in the Midwest called farmer. Anyone remember those things? Or an identity called auto worker. In 10 years, those identities, as we currently conceive them, won't exist anymore. Because what's happening is this massive transformation in the world that we are all seeing play out in the news on a regular basis. It's not my place to say whether that is good or not, but what I learned is when identities change, we go through this thing that's called identity crisis. And I want to suggest for the rest of the day that every one of us and every one of our audiences is moving through a massive identity crisis right now. Does that resonate with folks? And so what that's requiring of us as we're communicating is to find ways to help our audiences move through identity crisis and come out the other side. That's part of what the consequences are of what I'm calling the age of distrust. The third thing I learned from this walk was that I could literally change my story. And that's what happened. I got to about, let's say, Northern California, and I realized I was so sick of telling the same stupid story all over and over again. My girlfriend left me, my girlfriend left me, my girlfriend left me, my girlfriend left me. Finally, I realized I could tell a new story. Yeah, my girlfriend left me, but suddenly there was a new way that I was in the world. You know what? I didn't even like the relationship that much anyway. So things could get better. And what I realized is that in changing my story, I could start to change the outcome. I could transform who I was and what was possible for me. And in the years that followed, I got married, have a new relationship, have a business, have a much different identity in the world than I did back there in 2010. Does that resonate with you? Cool. So what I want to suggest today is that we are in what we can think of as an identity economy. And in the identity economy, our choices as consumers, whether we're B2B or B2C, our choices as employees and entrepreneurs, our choices as people are all based on what we want to learn and who we want to become. And that's a much different orientation than ever before. And what I think is underpinning this is a fundamental shift in how we trust. I saw a great TED Talk the other day by a woman named Rachel Botsman. Has anyone ever seen it? Check it out, it's awesome. And what she talks about is how we've stopped trusting companies and we started trusting strangers. So, you know, I could show up, I'm from Vancouver, I could show up here and I can get in some stranger's car, I can sleep in some stranger's house, I could use my phone to meet some stranger, right? Those are all things that I'm implicitly doing and we are all implicitly doing on such a regular basis that we're not thinking about it. And what we can see is that there is a transformation in what and how we trust. So her language was that in the old days, trust was institutional, which meant that an organization said, hey, we're big, so trust us. But in the new age, what it's all about is distributed trust. So I prove my trust based on the reviews. Your ratings help me then go on and say to the next company, the next speaking engagement, here's how good I am. I need to be transparent and inclusive in the way that I transact trust. Is this consistent with what you're seeing on your Instagram feed? That trust is happening in a new way? Yeah, head nods, I love it. And so, like I said, what I'm thinking when it comes to this shift in trust is that we're moving through this identity crisis as we move from one way of trusting to the other. This is an article from The Atlantic just the other day that says that loneliness is Instagram's hottest new trend. Is that not the scariest thing you've ever heard? Because has anyone ever been through an identity crisis before? Everybody should put up their hand because we were all 16. Right? Identity crisis is the most isolating experience that any human being can go through. And what's happening right now is we're all going through it simultaneously. And so you're seeing skyrocketing levels of depression, skyrocketing levels of loneliness, skyrocketing levels of people looking for help. And the reason this is relevant is because they are looking to us for help. Our content, our brands, our language. When they're lonely, they're going to Instagram or social media or to Google. There's a great study called the Edelman Trust Barometer that's been coming out every year for 20 years. And this year, the Edelman Trust Barometer, 30,000 people around the world, they asked questions about trust. What they found is that people trust search engines more than they trust experts, which is you, right? People are coming to you for the answers. And so what I want to suggest is that we fundamentally need to shift the tone in which we speak in. We can no longer say, we're the best, we're trying to win. Instead, what we have to think of ourselves as coaches or guides who are able to help our customers, our clients, our readers, our audiences to the promised land. I want to pause and let that land for a second and ask, what do you think? Comments, questions, ideas? Am I on track? Is this bullshit? What's happening? Yeah, that word empowers people. She said it empowers people. If you're their coach, you're helping them make the decision as opposed to making them the decision for them. It's consistent. I'm going to show you some examples in a second. Any other thoughts or comments? Yes, please.
It's kind of weird, I guess, but when people are trusting search engines, do you think it's because they're trusting brands and content, or is it more they're trusting themselves and they see that as that they search for it and it was there? That's just kind of.
I think it's a combination. So the question was, how do I see when people are searching search engines? I think it's also a behavior we've all become accustomed to. You can get better, quicker answers about the best restaurant in Chicago by going there as opposed to being vulnerable and saying, hey, stranger, I'm from out of town. Will you recommend a restaurant? You know, like people don't do that anymore because it feels so uncomfortable and it feels so vulnerable. Although I will say that I went to what's called Fulton Market, and I had ramen the other day, and I sat down, and there was this lovely couple, 22 years old, from Minnesota. And I sat down, and they were like, hi, how are you? And we had this 45-minute conversation, so it's not everybody. There's a hand up here.
Well, I was going to say, I feel like this makes a lot of sense, like what you're saying about shifting tone. It makes like perfect sense to me as like a consumer, but it's harder, I feel like, to step into, like to do that shift and to step into that role as a marketer and as somebody like who works for a company. I feel like it's hard to make that move from like, you know, we're the premier this or that. Like it's very hard to drop that as like in a marketing role, I feel like.
I think that's totally true. She said it's really hard to drop that. Who in their head is going right now, this sounds great, but how the hell am I going to tell my boss? Right? Like lots of us. So your point is great. This is hard, and it's essential. And it's the way that it's going to be. So we're here to introduce this. Yes, please.
Would you say this is for the more younger audience? Like, for example, if my audience is 65 and over, this shift of thinking is not for them.
I would say that everybody is going through this. People are reacting to this in different ways. If you're a millennial, you're out in the streets with Greta, right? If you're not a millennial, you're somewhere else wearing a red hat, right? So the same, and I'm saying that not politically to say one is better, one is worse, but everything that's happening on every side of the political spectrum is about identity. And everybody is actively trying to curate identity. The president is doing that just as well as Greta. They're doing the same function in radically different ways. Yes, please, over there.
It's not only totally true that all the layers are gone with for trusting strangers. I love kind of Airbnb that take my food, you know, all the, these people that we're trusting. We're not trusting the brand sales, we're trusting strangers. But I think there's also another level, for us as companies, brands that are out there, all the layers are gone too. They, consumers can get directly to the top of American Airlines when something goes wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So consumers have all the power now.
It's such an excellent point. And I often, when I talk about this, people say, well, isn't this just a fad? And I say, well, if technology is a fad, it's a fad. But technology is enabling us, I can have a bad experience on American Airlines tomorrow, and suddenly the whole internet is going to know about it, right? And we see that all the time. Like, I'm a baseball fan, and I was watching this stuff with the Houston Astros last week. Did anybody else see that? Some guy said something callous in the locker room in the moment, and it turned into this massive international incident. And again, not to defend or to aggravate, but more to say, like, that's the way the world is. So even if you say, hey, we're just some small company somewhere, one mistake, one interaction, we all know turns into the story of the internet. So more and more, we're going to see the emphasis in this direction. I want to show you how big organizations are already doing this. So, here's Apple saying, this is a brand new ad that Apple just put out this week or last week. Apple isn't saying, here's our great product, although they do have ads like that. They're saying, we want to help you feel more comfortable with the data that you're sharing on the internet. Buy the iPhone because we're going to help you feel more secure in your privacy. So it's much more about creating a trusting relationship from organization to customer, as opposed to just selling the features and benefits of the product. Here's another one. Everybody know who this guy is? So here's an organization that's been leading in this way for years, where they're saying, we don't even sell shoes anymore. We're selling individual empowerment. I live in Vancouver. Lululemon's headquartered there. They're a $1 billion business selling, enlightenment with your socks. And so we're seeing that this is getting interwoven, especially in B2C. For those of you who are B2B, you're still B2C customers. So you're getting exposed to this content on a regular basis. Here's another one with the Airbnb example. They're not saying, hey, you can make more money with your home. They're saying you and your family can live a life where your whole life is an adventure. And by the way, here's the way to do it. So the orientation is shifting from like, here's what's great about our product, to here's the promised land, and we're going to show you the way through the promised land. And what we can feel in all of these ads is the tone is different. The tone feels warmer, more guide-oriented, more inclusive. We feel like they're on our side, whether they're actually on our side or not. And we're seeing more and more people push in this direction. I want to show you this on a smaller scale. I saw this company just in Chicago the past couple of days called Vital Proteins. Does anybody here work for this company? Does anybody know this company? Great. So look at the way that look at the tone of the way they wrote this piece. You can see it's very much about trying to guide their customers somewhere to what we can think of as the promised land. What's the promised land for their particular customer with this particular post? Great skin, right? So who wants great skin? Many of us. So you want great skin? I'm your guide. I'm going to show you how to get there. I want to contrast this with a similar business that's in my hometown. So same business selling proteins. What are the contrasts between one and the other? I want to ask you that. What's different between the one on the right and the one on the left? This one is relatable. This one's about you. This one's about meet Addison. Addison looks like a nice Canadian guy. But who wants to meet Addison? Why? Think about all the things that are on my social feed. Addison? That's who I want to spend time with? Any other differences you notice between the two? Yes? You want an 8-ounce vegan smoothie right now, right? Is much different than like, you want nice skin? I'm going to teach you how to create nice skin. So the tone and the orientation has changed. It's not just about copy and tactics. It's all about a shift in tone. Any other differences anybody notice? Yes, please.
The one on the left is kind of telling you more at a high level with the header. So it's like pretty obvious what it is, where the Addison one's kind of confusing with the goals of the
Totally. So the goal is a little bit unclear, and that's more of a tactical problem. What I want to say again is it's all about trying to direct us to the promised land. You're the last question, then we'll go.
The one on the Vital Protein side is giving you something, and the body energy club is asking.
That is a lovely way of phrasing it, right? We need to give. We can't ask people to do things. Who wants to watch your boring case study video when I can go see what Kim Kardashian or Kylie Jenner's doing today? Like, those are who our competitors are. And those people are actually inspiring millions of people to act, think, consume in certain ways. There's a huge vacuum, and we need to step into the vacuum because our audiences are demanding it. I heard a stat the other day, 70% of millennials want coaches, 2% of them have them. So they're looking to search engines. They're looking to us for the most fundamental answers in our lives. And yeah, I get it. You need to sell product. But if you try to sell product in the old way, it's not going to work. I like to joke it like this. In the future, there's going to be 3 types of jobs. People who tell computers what to do, people who do what computers tell them to do, and storytellers who help people cope. And guess what? Every single one of you are in this third category. And I would say this is the best category to be in because it's the only one that pays. The top 2 pay, right? Or the top one and the bottom one pay. The middle one is going to get pushed out, even in marketing. And so our responsibility as leaders, and we're all going to have to be leaders. We're all going to have to think of ourselves as leaders, even if we're leading a tribe of 100 or 200 or 500 or 1,000, is to be able to communicate the feeling of change. And the way we do that most effectively is by showing other people how we've changed. Because for everybody, change is the hardest thing that we can do as a human being. And right now, all of us are going through change, and very few of us have support. And so the change in tone is going from, I'm the expert, I know how to get you there, here are the 5 tips, to like, I literally have no idea. So I want to focus on the process of working there together. And sometimes I'm going to do it right, and sometimes we're going to do it wrong, but I want to show you the way. And what we can see really clearly out in the world is that people who do the first thing well, we love, and if you don't do it well, we hate. So there's a real challenge for us as communicators. So what I want to do right now is give you a bit of an opportunity to experience this for yourself. What we're going to do is we're going to go into the basketball gym and practice shooting free throws. So we're obviously not at high-level brand storytelling yet, but we're going to talk about how to get there. But what I want to ask you to do first is to practice something that I call a connection story. So I want you to partner up, maybe with somebody you partnered up with before, maybe with somebody you don't know. So everybody grab a partner right now. So I want to ask you to spend 3 minutes with each other in total to answer these questions. And I want you to start by telling a story about a time you faced a significant challenge. It can be in your brand, it can be in your business, it can be at home. I wouldn't tell people about the worst breakup you've ever had unless you're ready for it. Definitely don't talk about a challenge you're going through right now because it's going to be hard. But why am I asking you to talk about a challenge? It's more interesting. And so for 3 minutes together, go through these questions. And what we're trying to do is just bring up some material. And then I'm going to show you what we can do with it next. So 3 minutes in pairs, going through these questions, starting now. Okay, wherever you are, stop. So here's the next step of this exercise. Here's the next step of this exercise. I'm going to ask you now to turn to somebody else, and I want you to be in pairs, so we're going to make sure that everybody's paired up in a second. You're going to turn to somebody else, and you're going to tell the same story you just told, but you're going to change something about it. Maybe you'll change the structure. Where did it start? Where did it end? Maybe you'll change perspective. Maybe you'll say, hey, I recognize now that there's a new or different way to change the story. Everybody's going to suck, right? Because we're all experimenting. So this is about like workshopping. And maybe, I won't say everybody's going to suck. It's going to be uncomfortable for all of us. And the way that this is going to get structured is partner A is going to have 2 minutes to tell the story. We're all going to do it, and I'm going to keep time. And at the end of 2 minutes, you're going to stop, and partner 2B is going to have 2 minutes to give you structured feedback based on the questions I'm about to show you. When partner A speaks, what's partner B's job? Listen. And what happens if partner A gets 60 seconds in and says, that's it? What do? No. Say nothing. You look uncomfortably at that person for another 60 seconds. The 2 minutes is theirs. So it's going to be 2 minutes for partner A, 2 minutes for feedback with partner B, 2 minutes for feedback for partner B to tell their story, 2 minutes for feedback. So a total of 8 minutes. Does that make sense? Great. So let's partner up. So find somebody new, and everybody needs to be in pairs. If you don't have a partner, put up your hand, and nobody start until I tell you to. Hey, let me grab your attention for 1 second. We're all going to do this at the same time. So nobody start telling their story. If you don't have a partner, please put up your hand. We need a partner over here. There's a partner over here, over here. There's a partner behind you. There's 2 partners back there. Does anyone else not have a partner? We need a partner right here for this woman. If you don't have a partner, you can come talk to me. Okay, everybody ready? We're going to start with your first story in 3, 2, 1. Partner A, go. Hi. You have 30 seconds. Stay here. Wherever you are, stop. Who felt like 2 minutes was really long? Who felt like 2 minutes was really short? Lots of, well, fewer of us. You're marketers. You should be chatty. Okay, so another 2 minutes for partner B to give feedback based on these questions. Okay, 2 minutes starting now. I'm just going to see if I can turn off my... So you did a great job. So the challenge was that you faced this kind of boss who was domineering and didn't take your advice, right? And the choice you ultimately made was to leave the job and leave the industry. And the outcome was being and getting the job that you like, where it's much more fun and in your story. So like great story because it really helps me understand what your motivations are. Which characters were well described? There weren't really any characters except for your boss. You could have made him more of a villain, right? It's like, yeah, she was evil. So give me one thing that would have made me understand how evil she was. What did she do that was evil? Great, so that one detail instantly gives me an image of her. When did you feel most engaged in the story? I could feel your anxiety around it, and it made me remember mistakes that I've made in my life too. So it was a really nice, like, it made it relatable. I remember being 22 and feeling like I was responsible for everything and not having the skills or understanding to know what to do because I was like 22. So that made me feel like a connection to you. Which of the storyteller's values? I think it's really brave what you did, right? Like you didn't just stick in and dig in with your feet and like keep working in the same job. You left the industry and you found something that you really loved. So like your courage really comes through that short story. Does that connect? And then what's one thing that will make the story better? Like it's a great story if you slow down and you make a little bit more detail. Like let me be there on your shoulder when she's yelling at you, right? Because then I'll be like, that bitch. And then I'll be on your side. Does that resonate? Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, I'm gonna stop, folks. Test. Okay, wherever you are, stop. Wherever you are, stop. So now it's partner B's turn. 2 minutes for partner B to tell your story, starting in 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, wherever you are, stop. So now partner A is going to give you feedback according to these same questions for 2 minutes starting now. Okay, wherever you are, stop. So I would say big round of applause for all of you because you all just did something really uncomfortable. So why did I get you to do that exercise? Number one, I want you to remember what human connection feels like, and I don't mean that in a mean way. What I mean to say is that every piece of content you put out, can it feel the same way? And secondly, I want you to feel how difficult it is. I want you to feel how difficult it is to change your story. Because we get so accustomed to telling a story, in this case, our story, but when we go back to the office tomorrow, your brand story, your content story, we get so used to telling it in a certain way, and it's really difficult to shift that. And the way to shift that is incrementally and through process. Let's see what I did there? And so here's one process that I follow. I am inspired by design thinking, and I believe that design thinking in a communication space needs to integrate three pieces. A creative piece, because where do all of our stories come from? Here and here and here. So it needs to come inside of us. We're artists even if we don't want to think of ourselves that way. Don't tell your boss I said that. Secondly, there needs to be an analysis piece. Third, there needs to be a prototyping and testing. We got to keep testing and testing and testing. In the future, there's going to be no brand story. There's going to be no mission. There's going to be this ongoing dynamic story that's changing all the time, just the way Apple or Nike are doing it. And most importantly, there needs to be some self-reflection at the end so you can say what works, what didn't, what am I going to do differently next time. I gave this presentation yesterday. I changed a whole bunch of slides in the orders between yesterday and today. And I do that every single time I get in front of every group. So it's always iterative, it's always dynamic, it's always alive. I've got a couple minutes left, so I want to take a couple questions, either about the exercise or about the whole kind of idea in general. Yes, please.
You just said that the brand story, there's not like a concrete brand story, it's changing all the time. I appreciate that because I feel like I've never quite landed on like, this is definitely our mission or definitely our brand story. But how do you give people like a consistent kind of like identity of an organization to rally around while still giving it like flexibility for different?
So it's how do you give people something to rally around and also give it flexibility to change? The language that I've seen out there, this isn't my language. It's from a guy named Andy Raskin, who's a colleague of mine in San Francisco, and he says, paint a picture of the promised land. Where are people getting to? What's changing in the world? And I mean, this is exactly what I did. I said, in the future, we're going to need to create more trust. I showed you contrast between the way that it was and the way it's going to be, and I gave you some tools that I think are going to be helpful. I think a similar approach is appropriate. And I would also say, engage your audience in exactly this journey. Say, we're going to the moon, whatever the moon is. Maybe the moon is, more prosperity, more abundance. Maybe the moon is a better self-care. Maybe the moon is a better planet. And now here are the small steps that we're going to take in order to get there. Tesla and SpaceX are doing this in such a good way. We're solving climate change, but we've got to sell cars in order to get there. So there's a connection between the big story and the little story. Yes?
What are some smaller brands, not like Nike, that you think are doing this well?
Many life coaches, right? Anybody who needs to connect on an individual basis. Influencers, right? Find your favorite influencer on Instagram and see what you like about what they're doing. It's probably personal, it's probably vulnerable, it's probably emotional, and it's probably iterative. They're just making it up and learning.
So when you say vulnerable, like, do you think that like the company should be vulnerable by revealing its values, or we should be like sharing vulnerable things about team members, or?
You don't need to tell your breakup story, right? But you do need to show what your process is of moving through change. Like every one of us when we're going through change, whether that's a big new IT project or a new strategy, there's all the stops and starts to getting there. That's really interesting for the rest of us who are trying to learn how do we go through change. So how do you find ways to share parts of that? What I found, especially when working with people who are consumer-facing and talking about themselves, is every time they make a step into vulnerability, audiences go wild for it because we're all looking for people who feel real. So find a way to bring another dimension of reality. It doesn't need to be, again, your breakup story, but some version of that. Maybe one more question before I close? Yes? So what element needs to be consistent through all the narratives? This is a different answer. It's the tone. It's not the words that you say, it's the tone. I'm a kindergarten teacher. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. When you find your tone, then that tone can run through every narrative. And it's a different tone if you're speaking to a financial services market than if you're speaking to, body energy or wellness stuff. You're going to need to find the tone that connects with your audience, but it's all about finding the right tone, and if you can stomach this language, the right feeling. So find the feeling and let the feeling run through it, and then you can iterate on the feeling. So to close, we started with a connection story. What I like to say is that connection stories are like going to the gym. And you've got to shoot your foul shots in the gym to be able to do what LeBron does in a game. And so rather than trying to go to the top, start with a connection story. If every single one of you could tell a compelling 2-minute story about yourself, you would all be better marketers because you would be able to bring that feeling to what you do. If we brought Steve Jobs here, he would be able to tell a great story off the cuff because he knows how to do those bottom stuff. You can't start from the top without knowing how to do the bottom first. This isn't an order. I'm not saying start with connection stories, but start learning connection stories in order to get there. And finally, the last thought I want to leave you with is that story isn't a thing. Story is a verb. All of us are storing ourselves and our lives and our brands right now in real time. And just like I said, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. It's the feeling that comes through your story that's going to be most memorable and most trustworthy as we move into this world of distrust. Thank you so much for your time. If you want these slides, you can text this number 345-345 and text the words story space guide. If you put another space after guide, it won't work. So story space guide, and my assistant's going to send it to you. It's been such a pleasure to be here. I hope you got something. Come up and ask me questions. Thank you so much.